Hello, and welcome to The Thin Blue Mind. Each week we will be looking at current policing issues and topics within the UK. Our regular panel consists of Steve Bradshaw, who is a TV and theatre actor, Richard Horton, author, and me, Dave Thomas, broadcaster. What we all have in common is over 80 years of combined police service. Now retired, we will be providing opinion and insights from the unique position of having been there and done it. Steve spent the majority of his service on firearms before being promoted to inspector, where he was a force incident manager. Richard was a career detective before going back into uniform as a response sergeant. Myself, I spent the majority of my service on the roads policing unit before going into CID and child protection. You may not agree with everything we say, but we will make you think. The Thin Blue Mind with Bradshaw, Horton and Thomas. Policing insights and opinion. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Thin Blue Mind. We were originally going to be talking about post-incident procedures following a firearms incident and the way police officers are investigated and treated. We're not going to be able to do that this week. Staying with the theme of firearms, we're going to look at the question that's been asked for years now is, should the UK police be routinely armed? There are all sorts of reasons for and against that. Steve, this is going to fall into your area of expertise, I suppose. So
let's discuss exactly what we're talking about here. The routine arming of officers, which means every warranted officer, as a condition of entry, condition of service would be that they are trained in the use of, quote, firearms. We're not just talking your response officers deploying to routine incidents. We're talking about every police officer and it being a condition of your job, and that you can't opt out unless there are some extreme circumstances, I would suggest. Straight away, for me, that initially causes us some logistical issues, doesn't it? The upskilling of every current police officer and also the skilling of every officer that joins the job, and the massive undertaking that is. And don't forget cost and training abstraction.
It was one of the questions that was asked of me when I did my interview 30 years ago. What's your views on arming the police? And mine was really very simple. I am not a good shot. And I've fired various things, shotguns mostly, clay pigeon and the like. I can't hit the side of a barn from inside the barn, is the honesty of it. Now, I bring other things to policing than the ability to shoot straight. But if there had to be a qualification for me in my service that you had to qualify to become authorised to carry a firearm, knowing the very strict and rigorous standards that training is, that might be the end of it for me.
Well, that's a good point you raise, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, it's a use of force, as is everything that the police officer carries these days: the baton, parva, taser, and handcuffs. And I'm just wondering, if you didn't have the aptitude, if we were to routinely arm everybody, if somebody didn't have the aptitude to use a firearm, could they be a police officer?
Well, routine arming would say not. If we're taking some kind of European model, or God forbid an American model, you would have to pass the qualifications just the same way you'd have to pass your defensive tactics, you'd have to pass exams on law and everything. You'd have to pass your qual sheet. For me, we currently have the standard, don't we? The armed response we have in forces is a select, trained group of people who are trained to a very high standard, being able to respond to a multitude and an array of firearms, edge weapon, other lethal weapon threats that they encounter. I think it would be incorrect to say that every officer would be trained to that level. We physically couldn't do it. And the application and assessment process is long and rigorous because you need to select the right candidates to go on a course. The attrition on an initial firearms course, I think they run courses with 14, 15, 16 people in. You'll get 5, 6 people through that course because, like you said, Dave, it's not just being able to shoot straight. It's the judgment training, isn't it? And then it's the command element of that, and it's the decision, should I, shouldn't I, recognising vulnerability, recognising the appropriate cover. There's a big long list, and the National Police Firearms Training Curriculum lists these, and there is a lot of judgment training and a lot of the decision-making that goes on in an officer's brain. We all know that there are officers out there who are great, who could easily take on the responsibility, and we also know officers who couldn't, and their skills within policing are probably matched somewhere else. The ARV officers have a very rigorous training program where they have to requalify every so many weeks. And if they don't get through, they fail. It's not just about carrying the weapon. It's not just about shooting straight. It's tactics of how do we stop a car? How do we stop a car that doesn't want to be stopped? How do we compliantly stop a car? How do we stop a car that's naturally stopped? How do we enter a building? How do we enter a building reacting to a terrorist threat? How do we enter a building reacting to someone who's just been shot? There is a massive list of tactics that those officers get trained to. And I think that sits well, and any officer who's carrying a gun needs to have all those skills that are required at what's called an ARV standard. Now, there is a standard below that called AFO standard, and you'll probably find the people who are stood outside protecting certain risk buildings, especially in London, Parliament, Downing Street, etc., who would be trained to AFO standard, which is the being able to shoot, be the very bare minimum tactics, being able to enter a building in an emergency to save life, or to seek out an MTA offender, a marauding terrorist attack offender, etc., etc. So that is a much lower level. But even if you look at the training requirements for that, that is massive, that's intensive. I would suggest that's 18% of someone's working life. So if you put that across every police officer and abstract 18% of your workforce any given day, we can't manage now, can we?
Just going back to what you were saying, routinely arming the police suggests that every officer will have a firearm to deal with whatever's in front of them. Now, my experience when I was in the police is that most firearms incidents were either pre-planned or at least had some prior notice of something about to go off. You might be able to tell me different, Steve. I can't think of any incidents where it's been spontaneous, where a firearms officer has gone to an incident, perhaps not aware that it's initially a firearms, but then having to draw the weapons anyway.
Okay, there's a couple of different layers to, I think, what you're talking about. I just want to establish exactly the scenario you're talking about. And the people that deal with planned incidents are tactical firearms commanders from a command level. They are in ranks, chief inspectors and above. They are we think Dave's got a gun under his pillow. Let's work out a job of how to do that, whether we get him on his way to the shops or whether we go to his house at 4 o'clock in the morning. Let's consider that and let's plan that job. That's a planned job for tomorrow morning, example. An initial firearms deployment is there's currently a bloke walking down the street, looks like Dave Thomas, and he's carrying a gun, stroke sword, stroke large knife, and he's threatening people or he's talking to himself or some other threat element to it.
All of those things I do. Perhaps not carrying a gun.
Yeah.
Or a knife.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's an initial deployment. They're run by force incident managers, which are initial tactical firearms commanders, and that's your force duty officer, force incident manager, whichever name you give it in your force. And they're the ones who will say, right, to the firearms officers or the operational firearms commander, which is normally the sergeant or the lead PC who's trained in that role, to say, go to such and such a street, this is the job, I'll give you a very quick briefing, this is your strategy, i.e. I want you to minimise the risk to the public in the area, maximise safety of the cops, etc., and go and see what's going on and give you a tactic to go and challenge you in the street. That's an initial firearms deployment. Another one, which I think you were trying to explain there, probably the only argument I can see for routinely arming the police would be, you as a traffic officer, you stop a car, doesn't seem to be anything other, it's speeding a little bit, tail light out, etc. All of a sudden, someone brandishes a gun. We had no information, we had no intelligence to suggest this was going to happen, and then you have to resort to your array of responses, from your mouth through to your baton, your parva and taser if you're carrying it, to be able to either get yourself out of that situation or to deal with it, neutralise the threat, etc., whatever it may be. And a gun would give officers that extra level of protection. I can't think of anything other in 20 years of being involved.
No, I can't.
And that's the scenario you're thinking about. And I think that sits with police officers well, because we go out every day and we know that we're going to be exposed to some risk. We understand as commanders in firearms, when you deploy officers, cops, someone you have control over, you maximise their safety because you know you're sending them into threat, and then you've got to judge that threat and have a proportionate response to that threat. And I think the routine arming of police officers does not meet that threat.
Well, it suggests, for those that advocate it, we live in a culture where police officers are at risk of imminent danger or death at every job they go to, and therefore they need some form of lethal force to counter that threat. And I don't think that threat's there. Well, certainly not at the moment anyway.
The other thing that crossed my mind is I'm aware that the sort of fitness levels, bleep test-wise, to carry a firearm are substantially above what you'd expect just for normal carrying the PAVA officer safety training. While I'm reasonably happy I would have managed that back in 2020, since I blew my knee out, I'm not at all happy that any amount of training would have got me there.
I don't think those who are advocating for the routine armoury policing are saying that we will be able to replicate the ARV model across everybody in policing. I think even they know that that's just not achievable, and we just can't have that abstraction from cops. So what you will actually get is some kind of two-tier level of policing. You will probably still get your armed response people who will be able to go to the ARV level with all the tactics, and everyone else will be at the AFO level. Now, even at the AFO level, it's a higher bleep test. So what would we say? Would we water it down? And this is where we would get some kind of middle ground, and we're not really covering it. We're not giving people the skills to carry that firearm. We would be in a middle ground where we're just not giving them enough, and the bleep test would stay at 5.4. And
well, I personally, I think that when we joined, when we were fit young bucks, the physical requirements were a lot higher than they are today. And personally, I think the bleep test is too low anyway for the majority of officers. My understanding that the beep test was at a higher level for firearms because in case your mate gets shot, you're going to be fit enough to drag them out the situation. That was certainly one of the main reasons.
Well, 9.4, I think I'm speaking right here from when I left. 9.4 was the ARV level, and 10.5 on the bleep is the SFO levels. I'm not saying it's too high, I think that's right, because it demands and the kit that they're carrying and the responsibility they have to their officers. Plus also, there's certain things you can do when you're out of breath. If you have to arrest someone after a long foot chase, you're blowing a little bit. Imagine you're blowing and you're having to aim a firearm and shoot it. And I think that's part of the equation for that. We would not get that with the routine arming. Everyone would be back down to 5.4, and you'd have guns in drawers and people's desks.
It's inevitably, I think, the training going to suffer if we look at how officer safety training, the sort of hands-on stuff, use your baton, use your cuffs, use your PAVA, have some open hand skills, how that has deteriorated over the course of my service from being a 2 or a 3 day course with some proper hands-on to being half the course is first aid. That's dropped away as a standard.
It has, and you don't even need to go to the taser level, because a 5-day course, I know in the 5-day course went to a 3-day course, didn't it, for people. We can't invest in the people with taser, and the debate about rolling out taser is such a hot potato. That's an issue. It's not there with police officers, I don't think. Also, I don't think there with the public. I really, really don't.
Before we move on to perhaps look at some of the practical issues, and we've already highlighted some of those, and you've touched on it, I think the best form of gun control is the public's attitude to firearms. And we very definitely have a culture in this country, don't we, of the public do not like firearms. Most police officers do not like firearms, and we have laws and policies in place to ban the majority of the firearms that were previously available, and you only have to look at the US. Just to come back before we move on, so if you've got a police officer without a tactic, who's not trained in tactics, I would think that, and if you've got something like a marauding terrorist attack, a lone actor attack, whatever you want to call it, then to have police officers that are authorised to carry firearms but not necessarily be aware of tactics in that particular situation could be more of a hindrance than a help, and actually might be a danger to the public.
Yes, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because there are some scenarios of, cops taking on armed people with the baton and being incredibly brave, especially in the MTA situations down in London, where they've gone running towards the firing.
Well, the gloves are off, aren't they, in that situation?
Well, there is, and you're a cop, you've got to respond, and you can't be seen to be hanging back. And I've said on firearms incidents in the past when the ARVs have been a little bit too far away, I've said I'm going to have to send the unarmed because we are cops and we have a duty to protect life under Article 2. The problem is if you routinely arm everyone and give them, a week's training a year? Let's be generous. Let's say they're going to get a week's training a year, including some training on decision-making. They already get it with the baton and cuffs, and it's called the NDM. But when you speak to officers and ask them to go through the national decision model, they can't because they forget about it. Because if you're not trained, if you train somebody in something and you don't reinforce that learning and you don't embed that learning by practice, it's going to fall out your head because there's another 500 things you have to learn and count a flashing buttons at you. But you're just counting on the right officer being in the right place, able to take the right shot. And, when's the last time they had a qualification shoot and members of the public could get hit and then ARVs turn into a scene who are the highly trained officers. And there's an AFO level officer who's there in the middle of it and has been injured. Or I'm not saying we don't have brave people, and brave people will continue to be brave people. And I take my hat off to them, but it's just not the way to go.
It's a bit like being forensically aware. If you're not tactically aware, you're going to walk into something, be in a place where you shouldn't be, and it's dangerous. Do you know the other thing that I worry about, and it happened in America, didn't it? Last year, I think, is where officers are carrying a firearm and they've got a taser, and there was a female police officer in America, one that she actually shot somebody, but she intended to take the taser out of the holster, but because of the pressure of the situation, so she says, she took a firearm out and shot the guy in the back, I think. Well,
as he was driving away, I've seen the video for this one. Yeah, he was driving away and she was trying to get a taser shot off as in the driver's seat, and she shouts, "Taser, taser."
That is a very real danger, isn't it?
There are a lot of issues going to be, and we laugh and we joke about guns being left on top of cars, but it'll happen, won't it? And there'll be security of the weapon and officers getting the weapons taken off them, or something happening with it. And I'm not trying to have a go at hardworking, brave cops on the street. I'm certainly not.
Well, going back to leaving firearms on the roofs of cars and negligent discharge, we make light of it. It's certainly not a laughing matter, and it brings us, I suppose, to a problem that is very evident in every police force up and down the country, is just general fatigue. They're absolutely battered with workloads. Do you want a tired cop that's had 3 hours sleep off nights carrying a firearm?
When you balance it up and you write down your lists of the pros and cons, the cons element and all this fatigue and training and ability and judgment, assessment, and just whether someone's right to do it, whether you get a good feeling about someone's ability to carry a gun. All this massively outweighs the pros, and the pros just aren't there.
We don't have a society that has a right to bear arms or routinely bears arms. There's plenty of shotguns floating around in society, and there's a small number of illegal firearms floating around. Is what we've got sufficient for that? I think it feels like it is. I don't feel like police are being held up at gunpoint regularly in this country, or unarmed police are being thwarted regularly by facing armed criminals. I don't think that's a problem that we have.
I say it's we have a culture in this country of not liking guns, which is a healthy culture. And we've all said that the threat really isn't there to routinely arm. And I think we're in danger if we do routinely arm. We're kind of creating a threat then, because the baddies are going to think, right, well, every police officer I'm going to meet is carrying a firearm. I'm going to have to carry a firearm. And we all know from London and the carrying of knives, at some point you carry a knife, you're going to use it. And it becomes a bit of an arm race, doesn't it? Another, and it's an example that I've seen personally, and I would never have thought about it had I not seen it. But it was about 20 years ago now. Talbot Square in Blackpool, I think one of the doormen had threats made against his life and that someone was going to come up and shoot him. And it was a credible threat. For those that know Blackpool on a Friday night in Talbot Square, it's like the Colosseum at 2 o'clock in the morning. It was at a time where police weren't overtly armed regularly. That's not to say routinely armed. And these two firearms officers had to have minders with them, i.e. their colleagues, non-armed police officers, because the public who were in the square at the time, who were drunk, were quite understandably curious, never seen a gun before, drunk, oh, what's this? Trying to grab at the gun. And we had to have police officers with the firearms officers to keep those people away. And again, that is a problem if you're going to a domestic or you're dealing with a drunk person. Are they going to grab your gun? Are they high on drugs, alcohol? It's a real toxic mix, isn't it?
About 10 years ago, where the routine carrying of firearms by firearms officers was made. Before that, they were kept in the safe. When you got a firearms authority, you took them out in the safe, put them in your holster, and away you went. But now, effectively, the safe was on your hip, and the authority to arm didn't mean that you had to run back to the car or whatever. So, yeah, imagine that for what we call night save officers, the officers who patrol the nighttime economy. Imagine that.
We're even getting into a fight, and things fly off, don't they?
Oh dear, where's that? Oh, I've lost a magazine of 17 rounds. Oh dear, where's that gone? I got another stat for you. 18,262 police firearms operations in the year ending March 2021. 6% decrease compared to the previous year.
Do those figures include an authorisation but firearms never drawn? A bit like when you red dot someone with a taser. It's counted as a deployment, isn't it?
Yeah. For example, you walking down the street here and say, there's a bloke down there. I think it's Dave Thomas. He's wanted for firearms offences, and the intelligence is that you carry a gun routinely. For example, I'm making this up. Deploy our firearms officers, and we'll go and do some kind of tactic in the street, and we get you arrested. I go, right, authority granted, and they're screaming down Blackpool Road, and all of a sudden, oh no, it's not Dave Thomas. Not Dave Thomas at all. It's John Smith. He's out for a pint. Okay, and so you've not even got to scene, and we withdraw the authority. That will still be an armed
but that would still count as a deployment.
Yeah, tick. But again, that's a 6% decrease. So, do we feel more safe? Do the public feel more safe? Do the public feel that there is a firearms incident, firearms problem? Is 18,000 firearms incident for the whole of England and Wales too much? Metropolitan Police Service and West Midlands Police accounted for 34% of those operations. So, the other 66% of those operations are for all the other county forces. That's not a lot.
It isn't a lot.
That perhaps nicely takes us on to the IOPC, and it's something we are going to talk about in the podcast we were going to do. But it's equally relevant to today's topic, is that, an officer discharges his firearm or her firearm, and the IOPC get involved. I mean, if every officer in the country's having a firearm, the cracky their workload's going to go through the roof, surely.
Okay, I'll give you a question then for both of you. Out of those 18,262 police firearms operations in the year ending 2021, how many do you think resulted in police firearms being discharged?
It's going to be, I don't know, 100.
Half a dozen at most, I would have thought.
6?
6.
Do you think it's low as 6?
I think it's as low as 6.
And Dave, you're saying 100? It was 4, and that compares to 5 the previous year.
I just have a sense for how infrequently we actually discharge firearms.
And it's not just about training people to shoot. 4 incidents where the gun's gone bang. And that's where the ILPC would get involved.
Yes.
We would have more logged firearms operations because we'd have more people out there on the street with a gun. I'd like to think we'd have a lot more than 4.
I think if you're looking at that 18,000 results in 4 for officers that train intensively, regularly requalify, have that sort of tactical restraint or whatever drummed into them, so we don't end up with like the American phenomena where somebody's running from 6 officers, for example, and all 6 put every bullet in every magazine into or around that, and just mag dumping and stuff.
Well, I can understand that because once one person shoots, and I'll give you an analogy, it's a bit like I'm driving in the car, my wife sat next to me, and she'll go, ooh, and I've seen the hazard, and I'm aware of it, but she will go, oh, she hadn't seen it till the last minute, but I'm thinking, has she seen something I haven't seen? And put the brakes on. And it's a bit similar, isn't it? How an officer discharges the firearm and they all go because maybe they're thinking, has that officer seen something I haven't? Right, my life's at risk. I can understand why that happens.
Yeah, I never want to be an armchair commander in relation to picking apart other people's actions at very stressful and very emotional situations. I will never be that guy, but I've seen so many videos from the continent, not just America, but on Europe as well, where we do have routine arming. Some of the judgment training and some of the decision-making is woeful. So, yeah, you're right, and all this would creep in, wouldn't it? And, you know what I mean? And the other argument in relation to the police armed because bad guys are more and more frequently being armed, I think turn that on its head.
I mean,
organised criminal groups.
I don't want to be too unfair to our American cousins, but I couldn't do their job in the US. Imagine, as an ex-traffic officer, every stop I do on the motorway could result in me getting shot. My nerves would be banged to pieces. So there's that hypervigilance, which again, we talk about mental health and well-being in the police. everybody carrying a firearm. Can you imagine the sort of hyper-vigilant states they're going to be in if everybody else is starting to carry a firearm?
The flip side of that is, obviously, it's a tragedy when it does happen, don't get me wrong. Sure. How many police officers are getting shot every year?
It's very few, isn't it, and far between, thankfully.
Yeah, very thankfully. So that's not on the rise. That's not showing disproportionality in our response, is it, on how we police? We've got 4 incidents. Now, I don't know what those incidents are. I deliberately didn't look them up because I didn't want to look at something that might still be under investigation by the ILPC. But we all know how long things take with the ILPC.
Yeah, in all of those areas, the ILPC have been found wanting.
Well, we talked about it last week, didn't we, in rape investigations and, potentially 2 to 5 years, these cases, and there's absolute uproar. And, we're looking at cases 5, 7 years. Officers on suspension.
10 years. Well, obviously, your career's over, isn't it?
Of course it is.
And you're thinking that not only are you going to lose your job, I could go to jail, I could do also. Imagine the impact on people's lives and that the abstraction we will get.
Well, that's the point we're making, isn't it? Like all these cops suspended when we've little enough police officers on the street anyway.
And because there'll also be the 18% abstraction for the training.
I don't think anybody that carries a gun in British policing is thinking, today I'm going to go out and shoot somebody. Probably the last thing on the mind. They've taken that extra responsibility and that extra training, and they perhaps get a satisfaction out of getting that level of training and expertise. Don't know of any of them, I think, go out and think, I'm going to shoot somebody today. It's the last thing on the mind, I think.
My experience, and it was certainly my experience, and those I worked with, was if I never had to get that gun out of the safe again, I'd be happy. There's no gung-ho element to it, and it's probably, if you lined up a group of 10 people and said, right, pick out the 2 firearms officers, member of the public probably couldn't, because they are not the stereotypical person you would expect.
Yeah. I would agree.
I think it's overwhelmingly clear that all of us aren't in favour of routinely arming the police. So perhaps, Steve, you're the best person to speak to regarding this as a former firearms commander. Perhaps you could just play devil's advocate and give us some reasons why we might want to routinely arm police, if you can think of any.
The ones I've had said to me are that that's how you're going to safely protect your officers. And that as an employer, as the force and the government and UK PLC protects those that go out and deal with the most violent people in society in extreme circumstances, you need to protect them any way you can. So any argument to say that you don't, that people are going to get shot, people are going to leave weapons and stuff, is not trusting your officers, and you need to trust officers. And that would be the alternate view, and that's the one that always comes up, to say you're never going to get around that. If it's 1 in 1,000 self-authorities or 1 in 10,000, you're still going to protect that officer at that moment, being able to draw their weapon and save someone's life or save their own life. So let's cater for that low likelihood but high event outcome. And people say, I'd rather authorise 200,000 people to carry a gun to save that one life every 10 years. That is the alternate view. What that doesn't serve proportionality test.
No, and I would counter that by saying that the vast majority of criminals want to keep their heads down. They don't want to attract attention. The only people I can think of, and we talked about the marauding attacks, is the people that have a mental illness or terrorism. And thankfully, we have other agencies other than the police that look at that and do a very good job.
There was a survey, wasn't there, a few years ago, was it 2017, which asked this question about routine arming. 34% of police officers were in favour of it.
I'm surprised it's as high as that, to be honest.
Yeah. I don't know what the public would think. That's the basics.
There was an article in The Guardian, I think, it was either today or yesterday, where are the police becoming like the military? And yeah, I know firearms officers these days, they wear Kevlar helmets and ballistic vests and this, that and the other. They're walking Leatherman. But there was a real concern that police becoming militarised. I don't think they are by any stretch, but that was the suggestion.
Wouldn't necessarily agree with you there, Dave. Back when I was writing the Nightjack blog, I wrote a piece called Truncheons to Tasers, where I was reflecting on what my kit was when I joined, or what my kit was at the time when I'd written the blog. And I'd gone from having a truncheon pocket and a little inside pocket for a pair of floppy handcuffs and the big hat, to a baseball cap, bulletproof stab-proof vest, military-style cargo trousers, a big belt on the outside with a full chandelier of gear on it, and it just looks very, very different to what it did. The latest iteration of uniform, frankly, it's paramilitary.
I suppose some would suggest it's more practical, isn't it?
It is more practical.
Because I used to hate them woolen pants, especially in the summer.
It was a long time ago, and it did change on how we responded to armed incidents. But the Michael Ryan incident, where you've got somebody opened up his gun safe, didn't they? I don't know if it was found property or whatever. Might not have been. But they opened up a gun safe and started giving out, well, Dave, you have a shotgun. Yeah. You have this revolver, this Model 10 we found, and this is an old weapon.
Oh, it's a 303.
Yeah, there's a 303, yeah. That got left here in 1945. It's probably not that extreme. And again, hats off to the officers who turned out looking for him, don't get me wrong. And, they've got tunics, and they're doing armed searches in...
And I would agree. We're better now. We have, because of the demands of the job and what we've put ourselves into, we are better equipped for it. And I think underneath it, we're still the same person that was wearing the scratchy woolen pants and the big hat. It's just we don't look like it anymore.
Yeah, it's this looking smart element of it, isn't it? I think you can still look smart as long as you've got a good quality piece of kit. If you've got good standard of uniform.
I refuse to wear my baseball hat. You think a 50-year-old's wearing a baseball cap, you can go and run.
I was going to say, did you not do a yellow one? On the slab, mate, on the slab. It's quite nice that the public see us as this unique UK policing model where we don't carry guns and we come and have tea and biscuits with old ladies and all the rest of it. That's gone in many respects, but it's not gone all the way to paramilitary and everyone's armed and stuff. But I think there is a need to educate the public to say, we've moved away from Dixon of Dock Green, and we're in a more 21st century role, but we've still got some element of that era of policing that you seem to hark back to. I always tell people as well who go on about firearms officers and being too paramilitary, and they hark back to the Dixon of Dock Green days. Whereas don't forget, Dixon of Dock Green was killed in a firearms incident. Basically, the public don't want it. The police service don't want it. Those who run police services don't want it. Home Secretary doesn't want it. Yeah. The local mayors don't want it. I can't see any police and crime commissioners who are busting a gut for it. I think it sits right and it's proportional and it serves the needs and it serves the threat as it is. Percentage outliers, the 1%, the 0.5% you can't take into your data set, I don't think, either way. You've got to deal with what feels right and what feels proportionate.
The Thin Blue Mind with Bradshaw, Horton and Thomas. Policing insights and opinion. When I'm not jousting with Horton and Bradshaw on the Thin Blue Mind podcast, and share stories of well-being and recovery on my own podcast, A Mindful Life. Those that follow me on social media will know my channel is now in its 5th season. So, in order to give my co-presenters a rest this week, I thought I would present a mini mindful life, or as perhaps we should consider to call it, a mindless life. We cram our heads with so much nonsense that no one outside it would believe how ridiculous it actually is. As a former police officer who has actually been retired less than 6 months, my thoughts turn less and less to the job, as we affectionately call it. This is good. It struck me though, as police officers, we wear a work mask. This is not a bad thing generally. We are presented with situations where we have to be strong for the public who look to us for help, sometimes in their darkest hour. Consoling a family who you've just told their breadwinner won't be coming home whilst blubbering with them is not really going to help matters, no matter how much you feel like doing so. Then there is the strong, silent type mask, who frankly everybody wears. Despite the organisation, or institution as I now prefer to call it, doing their best to convince officers that it's okay not to be okay, the biggest hurdle are the very people they are trying to convince. Vulnerability equals weakness, and big boys don't cry. The toxic positivity of senior leaders being eternally happy with the world only compounds the guilt felt by everybody that isn't. We deal with some pretty horrendous stuff as police officers. Those that have not been there will never understand, and that is not their fault. But we cope and carry on. One of the ways we do this is to normalise the abnormal. This is not coping. It is a mask you are wearing, and if you wear it often enough, you will forget to take it off. Remember your mother telling you your face would stick like that when you pull the face? One day, you catch yourself in the mirror, wondering who you are, and the people that love you the most will be thinking the same. So, be Spartacus and take your mask off. Then help your mate take theirs off. The good news is you will get your feelings back. The bad news is you will get your feelings back. Don't centre your identity around the trauma you have experienced. Who has no idea who they are outside of it? Going back to yourself can be terrifying, but others have done it and felt the same. You are not alone. Heraclitus said, "No man steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he's not the same man." The Thin Blue Mind, with Bradshaw, Horton and Thomas, policing insights and opinion. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. This podcast is in partnership with Policing TV, the leading policing media channel. So until the next time, on the next podcast, take care.